The 2022 preseason begins tonight for the New York Jets. What should we watch for? We will discuss on today's episode of the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, August 12th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thanking you for making this show your first watch or your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit that subscribe button. You'll never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Well, it's a big day. Preseason begins tonight for the New York Jets. They are visiting Philadelphia, a game against the Eagles. Kickoff scheduled for 7:30 Eastern Time. The game will be broadcast locally on CBS 2. There are some other Jets broadcasts. There's a station in Plattsburgh, New York that has the game. There's a station in Portland, Maine, if you're there, that's going to be carrying the game. They'll be carrying the Jets broadcast with the great Ian Eagle and Anthony Becht. And then some stations around Pennsylvania will have the Eagles-focused broadcast of the game. And if you're not living in any of those areas, you can subscribe to NFL Plus, which carries all preseason games live. You can stream the games. NFL Plus is essentially the quote-unquote new streaming platform of the NFL. Essentially, all they did was rename a service that already exists. But this year, they at least have options that don't make you pay $100 to watch preseason football. You can sign up for a monthly subscription, which will be much cheaper. And then there's going to be some NFL Network replays tomorrow at 6 a.m. And then I think on Tuesday there's going to be another replay. So plenty of options to watch the game tonight. Today we're going to talk about the game, though. What should we look for? And I do have to give this disclaimer before the beginning of the preseason this year, as I do every year. There's going to be a lot of analysis that comes out of tonight's game, and most of it will be over-analysis. Now, there was a time when I felt like there was nothing useful you could ever take from a preseason game. I've now evolved to the point where I think evaluating preseason is just mostly useless, not completely useless. But you have to remember a couple things. First of all, I don't think you would ever make definitive judgments on a player or a team based on one game. Well, really, what you're getting in preseason is not even one full game, because Zach Wilson's going to play probably a quarter tonight. Robert Saleh indicated the first team offense is going to get a series or two. So now you're really talking about, how many games would you look at and say definitively judge how a player performed based on the first quarter? It's a 4-quarter game. So this stuff gets really out of control. I would not read too much into it. And you're also playing against a team that's not game planning for you. So key things to keep in mind tonight. And then once you get to the second half, you have guys who are really not going to be on NFL rosters playing for the Eagles. So anybody who plays well, you got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. This is the annual preseason game between the Jets and the Eagles, and we have thrown tradition out the window tonight because the starters are going to play. The Jets and Eagles, the starters never play the preseason because usually it's the last game of the preseason, so usually it's after the dress rehearsal where you've played the starters into the second half. And it's right before cut down day, so usually that's when you get like the bottom of the roster guys. Is where you get the final statements when teams are determining those last spots on the roster. So we're going to get starters tonight. I want to give you a few players that I'm going to be watching. And of course, all 90 guys are going to generate some attention, at least anybody who gets on the field. But who are the players to watch? Well, the first obvious guy, we'll start with the offense. The obvious guy is Zach Wilson. And this performance that I'm already cringing because I know how overanalyzed. Zach Wilson's probably going to throw somewhere between 3 and 7 passes tonight. And these passes will be completely overanalyzed. If he plays well, everybody's going to go crazy. They'll say he's so much better this year. If he doesn't play well, everybody's going to panic. It's going to be like 3 to 7 passes. Or there could be like some in between where like he goes 5 for 5, but it's only like 20 yards, so it's not that efficient. Or something like 5 for 7, but like one of the passes is dropped interception, so you'll be able to create whatever narrative you want out of it. It's going to be, I'm telling you, it's already going to be silly. But I am looking for Zach Wilson tonight. I'm looking for a couple things. I'm looking to see whether he goes through his progressions properly. Does he make the right decision? Looking at the footwork. There are some certain things that kind of fell apart on him last year. And this will be our first chance to examine how things are looking. But there's not going to be any definitive judgment you can make on Zach Wilson. It's just going to be a couple passes against, vanilla defenses. If he misses a few, it's not a big deal. If Zach Wilson goes out and has a bad first quarter of a game this year, would you hit the panic button? No. Would you say the game is over? No. But for whatever reason, and maybe it's because we haven't had a game since January, everybody's going to overreact to, and it doesn't matter how some people will, it may be an overreaction because he played well. It may be an overreaction because he played poorly. It may be an overreaction because you're picking out what fits your narrative. But I'd like to see Zach Wilson go out there, and this will be our first look to see how improved is the footwork, how improved is the processing, the decision-making, the accuracy on short passes. It's our first examination, so keep that in mind. Don't go crazy, though. Next guy I've got my eye on is going to be Max Mitchell. And admittedly, I have my eye less on him tonight than I would have a day ago because the Jets signed Dwayne Brown. Dwayne Brown's going to be a starting tackle for this team. But heading into yesterday, Max Mitchell was looking at potentially starting for this team this year. And if the Jets were not going to make a move at tackle, I think Max Mitchell would have been the starter, and it would have been a sign that the coaching staff was really confident and maybe he was ahead of schedule. But Max Mitchell is an interesting player to watch because if the Jets suffer another injury at tackle, I don't think there's another Dwayne Brown coming in. I don't think the Jets have the money. I don't think that there's going to be another quality player available for this team to get. So somebody's going to have to step in if there's another injury. And it could be Udoka, and it could be McDermott, but you're not getting anything good out of these guys. So how good does Max Mitchell look? Can he hold up? Can he anchor in pass protection? Can he get a push in the run game? That's an interesting one to me because he's the only guy with upside. And I think the Jets kind of answered the question a little bit by signing Dwayne Brown because if they were that confident in Max Mitchell, if they felt like he was that far ahead of schedule, maybe you think twice about giving Dwayne Brown, however much money he made. There are some conflicting reports about the actual size of the contract, but it's a decent amount for a guy you just brought in, for a guy who's still available in August. And I think it's a type of move that's justified if you don't believe in anything you've got at the tackle position. So I don't know how big my expectations are for Max Mitchell. In fact, my expectations are never big for a fourth round, or almost. Last year, there actually was a fourth round pick. I had high expectations for Michael Carter. So I can't say never, but fourth round pick, the guy usually went in the fourth round because he got some stuff to work on. That said, we'll see what happens with Max Mitchell. He's the one upside guy the Jets have as far as tackle depth goes. So it's more of a barometer than it is anything I'm hoping for. I just want to see where Max Mitchell is. Is he where I expect him to be, which is pretty raw, pretty much in need of development, or is he a little bit further along? And is he a guy that maybe, even if he's not going to be able to start the full season for you, if you need to call on him for a game or two, what can he give you? Now, looking at the wide receiver position, the guy I have my eye on is Denzel Mims. Obviously, the first 2 years could not have gone much worse. With some decent games, the second half of his rookie year, admittedly, but this is a guy who 2 years into his career has 0 touchdown catches, is under 500 yards of receiving. And I actually did an article last week on GanggreenNation.com. I looked at the last decade's worth of receivers who went in either the first or the second round and had less than 500 yards their first 2 seasons. And it's not great. It's not, there are not many places where you can have legitimate hopes Denzel Mims going to turn into the impact receiver the Jets hoped they were getting. And you could also look at the way the Jets approached this offseason, where they had 2 incumbent starters returning, and then they gave Braxton Berrios $6 million a year. I know Berrios is going to be a return guy, but I don't think you give $6 million a year exclusively for a non-Devin Hester caliber return guy. And then they draft Garrett Wilson at 10. And they also tried to trade for Tyreek Hill. So they pretty much did everything they could to block Denzel Mims, which shows you what they think of him. It shows you that they're not that confident in him. The one thing I did find, though, when I wrote that article is there are a couple of receivers who've put out, decent seasons, in that group of first and second round picks who struggled the first couple years in the league. There are a couple guys, a couple of 500-yard seasons in there, which is kind of what you'd look for, maybe a number 5 receiver. And that's really where Denzel Mims is highest possible outcome here is the number 5 receiver spot. And that's really what the Jets need right now. I think the top 4 are pretty clearly set. I don't know what, you could argue what order the top 4 are in, but I think the top 4 are clearly in some order: Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, Braxton Berrios. Who's the 5 receiver, though? That's where Denzel Mims could step in. And your 5th receiver, what you're looking for, is somebody you can count on if there's an injury, maybe step up and give you credible play, and also help on special teams. And there's been some buzz that Denzel Mims is going to work on special teams. Listen, most of the time your number 5 receiver has to play special teams. In fact, anything that happens in this game for one of the low receivers on the depth chart, I feel like a special teams tackle is probably worth like 3 or 4 receptions, because yes, you want good backups in case you need to call on them, but the most immediate impact any receiver down on the depth chart at 5 or 6 is going to have is making plays on special teams. So as much as we'll watch Mims play, and Mims should play well, I mean, he's got so much ability. He'll be playing against backups, third stringers. Last year he had a big game against the Giants in the preseason opener when he was playing in the second half of these games against fringe roster types. But he's got to produce. I mean, he's clearly, I think 2 years in, it's pretty clear the coaching staff does not love him. So he's got to earn his spot. And then the last guy I'm going to give you is an undrafted free agent the Jets signed out of NC State, Zonovan Knight, who reportedly has been doing well at training camp. And this is not a guy who's going to have any impact in the early season for the Jets. But I got my eye on him, and he may be heading to the practice squad. But the reason I have my eye on him, and this is like, I don't think preseason's really worth watching for the most part. But I think one of the interesting things is when you can watch somebody who, maybe a month or 2 or 3 down the line, maybe we're talking late October, November, December, it's your one chance to like look at these guys who are further down on the depth chart, who your team may need to call upon later in the season. And Zonovan Knight, I think, is an interesting guy because, again, he's been showing some good agility at camp. And Breece Hall, Michael Carter, those are your top 2 backs. I would think Tevin Coleman's going to be in the third back. There could be, I think you want a veteran in there to help in the passing game, especially pass protection, especially with a couple other young backs. But further down the depth chart, there's a spot that's open. And this is, the Shanahan system that the Jets run, the quote-unquote Shanahan system. It's always shown an ability to find unheralded backs, guys who went in the late rounds, guys who are undrafted free agents, and plug them in and have some success. So the way Zonovan Knight reportedly has been doing well at training camp, maybe he's a guy down the line if the Jets suffer an injury, and this is your chance to look at him. So those are the guys I have on offense that will have my attention tonight. But as we continue on this Friday episode of Locked On Jets, there are some guys on defense I'll be watching tonight. I'll tell you who they are as we continue in this Jets-Eagles preseason game preview. Of course, the opening of preseason means that the regular season is just a couple of weeks away, and I'm not sure anybody's going to lay money down on preseason football. There are too many variables to have an accurate bet on preseason games, but you want to lay some money down in the regular season, BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league. That includes baseball, the NBA, the NHL, combat sports, even esports, even golf, and yes, the NFL. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting scores and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you again for making Locked On Jets your first listen or your first watch every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Talking Jets-Eagles preseason football tonight. Last year the preseason opened and I was out in California and I've missed the game live. The Jets were playing the Giants and I went to a performance of Hamilton on tour. And I will never regret that decision because, do you want Jets-Giants preseason football 12-7 or Hamilton? Tonight I don't have any plans, so tonight I will be watching the game. Let's talk about the defensive side of the ball. And you're watching all the players, and I know Sauce Gardner is going to generate some buzz. I know watching a lot of these guys are going to generate attention. But the first round pick I have my eye on tonight is Jermaine Johnson. Part of it's because he started slow in training camp. There were reports he was running with the third team, and slowly you've started hearing reports that he's coming on. He's putting together some sacks in practices now. Reminder of what the Jets' offensive line has been the last couple of days with Mekhi Becton out. They had to sign Dwayne Brown. But we'll see how Jermaine Johnson comes along. The Jets are in a decent spot with him because they don't really need a lot out of him this year. They've done a pretty good job at improving their edge spot. Last year, the edge spot was really in tough shape after Carl Lawson, and after Lawson went down, they were in big trouble. And then Vinny Curry, of course, went through all of his medical issues. He was the other guy you thought you maybe could count on. This year, you have more guys in play. So this is, again, like I said in the first segment, with a couple of the guys I mentioned, it's more of a barometer, like Max Mitchell or Zach Wilson. This is more of like a barometer to see where Jermaine Johnson is, and you would like to see him go out and play well, especially if he's going to be in the second half. The first warning sign with Jachai Polite a couple of years ago was he was playing against third-teamers and looked awful. He was getting dominated by third-teamers, and I'm not saying that's going to happen with Jermaine Johnson, but what you'd like to see is Jermaine Johnson go out there and play well tonight, because he's probably going to play. I would imagine he's going to play into the second half. He'll be against third-teamers. He'll have an advantage. He's a first-round pick going up against guys who do not have a first-round pedigree. So, opportunity for Jermaine Johnson to kind of flourish. If he goes out there and dominates again, it's playing third-teamers. It's not that big of a deal. But you'd like to see him go out there and play effectively. And if he doesn't, then that shows you maybe we're going to have to wait a little bit on his production. When we get to the linebacker position, a guy I have my eye on is on the first team, Quincy Williams. And part of it's because of how much buzz the Jets have been giving him. There's been all this talk about how the Jets think he may have Pro Bowl potential, which I don't know that he does. I mean, I know he's fast. I know he hits hard. But this will be a first indication. And a lot of it's going to come down to instincts. Is he more fluid? Does he look more comfortable playing coverage? Is he hitting the right holes? That's one of the issues. One of the reasons he hits so hard is that he plays kind of out of control. And yes, that leads to highlight reel hits, but it also last year led to moments where he ran himself out of the play or he was out of position and a play went against the Jets. So I think a question with Quincy Williams, and this is just the first game. He's probably going to play like a series or two, so we're not going to get that much information, but it's a first chance to see whether maybe he's figured out a way to channel things. Because, you don't want Quincy Williams to lose his aggression. Part of what made him effective last year was his ability to fly around, his ability to make big hits. So it's not so much you want him to lose that. It's more channel it, pick your spots for it. And while we won't get many opportunities to see him tonight because he's not going to play that long, it's our first opportunity to see how things have progressed for him. And then I'd also like to talk about the secondary for a minute here. Guy I have my eye on tonight is Brandon Echols, who was a starter last year, kind of in over his head as a second outside corner, but now he's down to number 4. I guess you could say he's the number 5 corner on the team, but that's counting the slot. So let's just count outside corner as its own position. Brandon Echols is now the number 4 outside corner. He's almost overqualified because he got starting experience, and I don't like Brandon Echols as a second corner. I like him a lot though, especially with the experience he got last year as the second backup at the outside corner spot. But he was a rookie last year. I mean, he did have that one pick 6 against Tua Tagovailoa in the game the Jets lost in Miami, but it was really rough on him. And I'd like to see how things have progressed this year. He's not that big. I mean, I think he's going to have a tough time ever playing. I think he's going to be more of an off corner than a press corner. That's just going to be true through his career, but I'd like to see the strides he's made. And then another late round pick from the Jets last year at the corner position was Jason Pinnock, who is now listed as a safety. He played safety late last season, and there was some talk during the offseason program. They were actually giving him number 1 reps with the first team. So with a full offseason of work at a new position, where's Jason Pinnock? And this is, again, the first chance to really see it. And what you see tonight is not the type of thing that you go crazy over, but it's a first look at a guy playing a new position who's had a full offseason of work, and he's gotten to know the system well this offseason. As a rookie, when you step in, you're really kind of, you have so much going on. It's really difficult to get a full grasp of the system. But now Jason Pinnock has had a chance to digest everything, and I'd like to see how he looks at his new position. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we will close out this show, and we're going to talk special teams. Who are the players to watch tonight? I'll tell you what I think as we close out this Jets-Eagles preseason preview. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday, previewing Jets-Eagles preseason football. Of course, this preview is a little bit different than your previews in the regular season, because regular season we're focused on matchups, who are the key players the Jets need to win the game. It's a little different this year. a little different. I'm sorry, a little different in preseason because you're focused more on player development. You're evaluating position battles. You're evaluating roster battles, and the Jets have both a position and a roster battle at kicker. Greg Zuerlein, the veteran, Eddie Pinheiro, my new favorite player, the guy who came in and was perfect on field goal attempts last year for the team. Even the thing with Eddie Pinheiro is the ball looks so ugly coming off his foot, but it went through the post last year. And this is always more important because in recent years, I can't tell you how many times we've gotten reports from some guy at Jets training camp who's been an effective kicker. And these are always guys who are totally inexperienced. Fortunately, this year, the Jets actually have some guys with the track record of success in the NFL. But it's happened so frequently in recent years where somebody's doing well in training camp, but then they get into a stadium, an actual NFL stadium with fans in there. It's a real situation. They actually have an opponent rushing at you, and they just can't kick it. They just can't make a field goal. They can't make an extra point. It's a little different this year when you have two guys who have NFL experience, but it'll be interesting to see how this goes because to this point, it sounds like Zuerlein has been ahead in the kicking battle, but I think at the end of the day, this is typically determined by what happens in the games. And I think that's true of special teams in general. Now, the Jets don't really have a position battle for the return guy because Braxton Berrios is going to be the primary guy handling both kickoff and punt returns, but the Jets aren't going to put Berrios out there for that. He may have one return or two. So there's a chance for somebody to emerge as the backup return man. And this might be somebody, if he's a return specialist, who just earns a spot in the practice squad and gets called up in case there's an injury with Berrios. But I think a lot of guys are going to have a shot to earn that role. And, it may be somebody who's actually on the team who serves another purpose for the Jets, is maybe somebody on the 53-man roster. But there is an opportunity for somebody on this team to earn it. I think what will happen is the Jets will rotate guys in and out. So there'll be plenty of people with an opportunity. And if somebody breaks a big return, maybe they turn into Berrios' backup. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you enjoy the show, hit that subscribe button. You'll never miss an episode. New notifications will go out as new episodes are posted. Please, if you're listening on a podcast source, give the show a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, big thumbs up. It helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find Locked On Jets. Despite my preseason skepticism, I hope you enjoy the game tonight if you watch. And we'll be back on Monday to talk about what happened.